Hello and welcome to a very special draft episode of Zero Hanger TV, where today I'm joined by Rookie Me Central Draft Analyst Michael Alvaro. Michael, how have you been?
Yeah, really good. Good to be back in the Zero Hanger studios. So excited to talk all things draft.
And there's plenty to talk about. We're going to cover all the latest on the mid-season draft, the top prospects and the clubs likely to be looking at those names, as well as the leading figures in the national draft pool after a busy few weeks away from the Coates Talent League. And on top of that, the class of 2022 and how they're faring at AFL level. The 2023 mid-season draft is just a fortnight away, and plenty of prospects are starting to put their hands up as the leading names for this year's mid-year intake. Plenty both in Victoria, SA, WA, scattered across the country. We'll see some players, both former AFL and potentially looking for their first contracts at the elite level, in line to gain a spot on an AFL list. Very exciting time for plenty of prospects. How's it all shaping up on the Rookie Me side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time of year, sort of mid-year, obviously with the draft for the AFL, and you get a few overages, and as you mentioned, that second chance saloon for some players. It's also championship season, so we've had a lot of representative trials and a few showcase games, which is always fun. It's the best footy, the highest quality, the best of the best. All the best competitors competing against each other. So it's the best time of year for us until the draft comes around. So yeah, really busy and excited about what's to come.
And we'll be jumping into some of those showpiece games in a second, but I guess there's plenty of questions around how the mid-season draft works, who's eligible, what clubs can pick, and obviously it'll come down to vacant list spots, which some clubs can open. I think there's only about 5 clubs at the moment that have those list spots open. Some will do so with long-term injuries. There can be those players can move to the inactive list, player retirements. So there'll be a few clubs picking, and I think from what we know now, there'll certainly be more than I guess those 5 clubs that are in order. But who are the players that they can pick from, and how are they eligible? We know that the AFL made a change this week to the eligibility criteria.
Yeah, so the change you mentioned obviously is that if you've played 3 state league games, so that's across the VFL, Waffle, Sandford, TSL, if you played 3 games there, you're eligible. Essentially, it used to be that you had to have nominated for the previous national draft, the most recent one. So that's obviously still the case for so many of the prospects. You also have to be at least 18 years old by the start of this year. So that essentially means that all the prospects who are in line for the mid-season draft, all of those candidates have been overlooked at least once at the national draft. So Harley Reid can't go in this draft, unfortunately. We're going to be speaking about
mid-season tanking.
A couple of clubs would have been happy with that. But it's essentially, I guess, a chance for the overlooked talent, a few mature ages to get a look in, and for clubs to top up their stocks, if they've had injuries, long-term injuries and things like that happen. So it's more of a top-up kind of draft rather than the best available talent.
And I guess, as you mentioned, the best glimpses that some of these talent scouts and AFL list bosses have gotten is across the recent weeks, and the AFL do a great job of kind of giving these players who are hoping for an AFL contract that platform. And one of them's through the Young Guns games. They played Vic Metro and Vic Country over the last 2 weeks. It's a mix of, I guess, just players that AFL clubs do believe could be a chance for a spot on a top list, and then they combine for a team and play off against some of the best teenage talent. So obviously it's more Victorian players if anything. So there's a mix of VFL, mix of top age Coates talent players who are in their 3rd year in that underage league. But certainly some big takeaways from the first 2 games. And Ryan Maric, the Gippsland power forward, was a standout, but wasn't always remaining in attack across both those fixtures.
Yeah, so he's arguably probably one of 2 top prospects overall in the mid-season draft. And as Mitch alluded to there, played in defence in the second game. So against Vic Metro, he was up in attack where he's probably cut his teeth, made his name, if you like, for Gippsland Power. He switched back to defence and got to use, I guess, a bit of his running power. His sort of booming kick can also be a pretty neat short kick as well. So got to showcase a little different side to his game against Vic Country on the weekend. So he's still right up there. Obviously quite a talent at 193 centimetres and covers the ground beautifully. So he's certainly not done his stocks too much harm in those 2 Young Guns games. And as you mentioned before, the pathway is quite clear for a lot of these guys. They they step up in these games, they're only going to be even better chances of getting picked up.
So what's been the difference between this season for Ryan and last year? Obviously overlooked at the draft. Last year was his draft year, and then he gets that third season with the power, and he started off, I think it was, we've only had the 3 or so games in the Coates Talent League, but he was pretty quickly on the radar of AFL clubs.
Yeah, obviously, like with him, he was just unlucky last year. He had a few injuries and didn't really get an extended run to play as a top ager with the power. So, you come back as a 19-year-old and you probably wasn't even the highest touted 19-year-old out of that program. They were trying to get a couple other sort of 19-year-olds into that space, and Ryan Maric was just the one who really popped up early on. He kicked, I think, a bag of 4 goals in his first up game against Murray. It's just been on the radar ever since. So you only need one opportunity to catch the eye, and then he's kept on taking his chances. So all credit to him. He just needed that extended run, and that's really the difference, just opportunity.
Yeah, and another, I guess, list spot that a lot of clubs are looking at on top of that key position talent, the ruckman in the spine and how important that is. And we've seen the ruck merry-go-round, I think, in the AFL over the off-season the last few years. And I think that the national draft pool over the last couple of years probably hasn't offered a standout ruck option. I think you've had your Toby Conways and your Harry Barnetts across the last few years, but they're more second-round picks. None of those Tim English types that bona fide leading ruck options, but Clay Tucker could be one through the mid-season draft that it sounds like a lot of AFL clubs are looking at. What type of ruckman is he? Is he more that athletic or big body type, and is he someone that I think clubs would probably still need a bit more time for? I think when you look at a West Coast, they need probably a ruckman pretty quickly. So would they be a club looking at someone like Clay, or is he probably someone that's going to be a bit more of a slower burn? Yeah,
it is typically a tools draft, and Clay Tucker's going to be right up there. I think he is a little more long-term. There's probably guys like we might mention them a bit later, who are more mature age and ready to go if clubs are in desperate need of that ready-made ruck. But Clay's probably a guy who needs a little bit more development. He probably hasn't necessarily taken games by the scruff of the neck yet, but the signs are there. He's awesome at the centre bounces. He's got really good ruck craft. Obviously over 200 centimetres, so ticks that box, covers the ground quite nicely. He's been able to sort of expand his game around the ground, so whether that be dropping back to take intercept marks in defence or going forward. We saw in the most recent Young Guns game, kicked 2 goals in a quarter, storming out on the lead, presenting really strongly. So he's a guy who's slowly adding pieces to the puzzle, and talented 204 centimetre players who are quite athletic don't come around too often. I think, you alluded to some rucks in previous drafts that were probably your second rounders, might have 3 or 4 first rounders this year. So, whether a club wants to take the chance on Tucker or wait for the end of season draft, we'll see. But he's probably, to answer your question, more of a long-term option.
Yeah, and then, like you said, it's probably a tall order draft this mid-season intake, and one of them is probably going to be Jack Buller, Claremont forward, 21 years old, I think 99 kilos, 199 centimetres, and he's put his best foot forward so far this season in the Waffle Seniors. He'll also get a stint for WA in the state game this week, so that's going to be a huge opportunity for Jack, big-bodied forward. What have you kind of seen from him to start this season out west?
Yeah, well, I originally saw him playing state footy as an under-18 prospect. Obviously, a few years ago, he was in a pretty stacked WA side that won the championship, and saw all his mates get drafted. And, you see a comment from him saying he just wasn't committed enough. And that's just sometimes the kind of, I guess, epiphany that some of these young kids need. We've got to remember that they are, just 18-year-olds in that draft year. So he's worked hard at his craft and obviously been super to start the season. Missed a couple of games for Claremont, but was back on the weekend. And just a really strong presence inside 50s. Seen guys like Will Schofield, an ex-AFL defender who played for West Coast in the Waffle, playing for West Coast Reserves, obviously. Said that Buller was quite tough to play against. So that's all the credit you need, really. That calibre of a player saying you're a tough opponent. So, he's as a local boy for West Coast, potentially, he's going to be right up there in consideration. So it could even be the top pick. So, wait and see. Yeah,
you can actually catch that interview with Will Schofield on Zero Hanger. I remember him speaking on that game. He first lined up, had no idea who Jack was, and then he pretty much won them the game. Took some one-handed grabs and against a premiership player first year out of the AFL system. So he said he was certainly one that should be on an AFL list, and now a couple of years later, looks like he's every chance to. Some more maybe mature talent or players who aren't playing, I guess, in the Coates League or have kind of only just come out of some of the junior systems. Player like Ethan Stanley at Box Hill, I think his name's kind of been floated around a little bit, but it sounds like he really took his chances at the Young Guns games.
Yeah, I mean, he was a little quieter in the first one. The conditions out at Trevor Barker Oval in Sandy probably weren't conducive. A bit windy, bit wet. Yeah. So, he's a great outside runner. He loves to take ground in front of him, and we got to see that at Icon Park, God's Country in Carlton North. A drier day, and he got to cover heaps of ground, carry the ball, and use his booming right foot. He kicked 2 absolutely ripper goals from long range. And they're just the glimpses that you like to see. So I think he's one that I like. Whether the recruiters do, it's a different question. But, I think he's definitely got those traits that you like to see. As a winger, it's a bit of a specialist role too. And there's going to be a lot of clubs that sort of want to tie that down. And given he's had an extra year, he's had to do it the hard way, but popped onto the radar at VFL level. It goes to show that he's probably primed and ready to go. So I like him. If you want me to mention a couple more, obviously,
go for it.
Guys like Noah Casalini from South Australia, he's moved over, I believe, from New South Wales. He came through the Northern Academy system there. He's a forward. He won the Best of Field medal in North Adelaide's Anzac Day game. So, he's certainly a pretty handy goal kicker. Another one, Robert Hansen Jr., a really quick sort of ground-taking, line-breaking forward for Subiaco. He's a bit of a goal sneak too, who's put his name on the radar after being overlooked last year.
Yeah, there's a few there certainly to watch out for. I think, and I think you mentioned at the top, Ethan Stanley, that Box Hill talent, the Hawks have done fantastically well through that program over the past, I think, 2 or 3 seasons to get guys like Jai Newcomb, James Blank, Fergus Green through delisted free agency. I think Lachie Bramble was another one. So whether it's through the Hawks, that'll be one to kind of wait and see. I think their midfield's pretty locked in at the moment, but maybe an opportunity with another AFL club to come. So mid-season draft set to fall on May 31, Wednesday, and it will be done remotely. And you can catch it all live on Zero Hang, and I'm sure Rookie Me Central well and truly front and centre there as well. Plenty to look out for. And then as well as that, you guys certainly leading the space for national draft talent and kind of keeping an eye across every state, every league for the national draft prospects. But a big game over the weekend recently. The AFL Academy, their second stint of the season, coming up against Carlton's VFL outfit, and they managed to get a win. They did, pretty impressive. Like, Carlton VFL didn't have all of their AFL listed players in there, so they probably had about a handful. Yeah, certainly still I guess decent for an AFL Academy side. Haven't played too much together, maybe a little bit with a few teammates, to come up against a VFL side who are pretty locked in. It's a decent effort. Absolutely. So, you've still got guys like Jack Martin, Josh Honey's played recently, Lachie Cowan. So, to play against those mature bodies, even guys who are just genuine state leaguers, it's positive signs. These are meant to be the best, 30 players in the country at their age level, but they still are young, and some have a ways to go in terms of their development. So, a positive result, and I think under the Marvel Stadium roof, perfect conditions for a talent showcase. So better than Trevor Barker. Absolutely ideal. We didn't want it out at Williamstown or Trevor Barker. So under the roof, it was a great showcase, of course, as the curtain raiser for the Blues' most recent loss. A bit of a sore point. We don't have to touch on that for you. That's fine. A great showcase. Some of the standouts, and I think this is going to be a big talking point throughout the rest of the draft year, were the Gold Coast Suns Academy kids. So you got Jedd Walter, Ethan Reid, and Rogers being the leading name out of the match on Saturday. Yeah, Jake Rogers, best of field, won the MCC President's Medal, I believe it's called. They didn't name it that, but I think that's what it's called. He was super. Played pretty much full-time midfield. Attended about half the centre bounces. They rotate pretty heavily with that 30-man squad. So just an electric kind of player at ground level, super clean. He's really zippy. He's got that speed and agility, and he's only small, 171 centimetres, but you have to have those elite traits if you want to make it at AFL level at that size. He definitely does. He ticks so many boxes, really hunts at ground level, as I said, but both ways. So you can tackle and win his own ball, really efficient, great decision maker. I could go on and on. Gun player, deservingly best of field, won the most touches
with 26 on the day, 6 clearances. So, he'll be pretty happy with how he went.
Yeah, just a little bit. A couple of good comments there. But the other two as well, Reid, a ruckman, Walter, a key forward, they're certainly going to be penciling in a few decent or varying positions, the Suns, when they nab all three at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a great crop for him because you can, as you said, like cover a few bases. So Jedd Walter's probably the most highly touted of the three. A big bustling key forward, super just physical, aggressive, and physically ready. So he's he had no trouble adjusting to the senior opposition. Attacks the ball so well in the air and really hustles with his tackling pressure at ground level, which not many tall forwards do. So that's a good point of difference. I'd probably have him in that top 5 range, to be honest. I rate him pretty highly. Ethan Reid, one of the rucks that, 200 plus centimetre prospects who's really, raising his stock recently. They've got, 4 odd 200 plus centimetre players in the academy, and he just covers the ground so well. Had to play a bit more forward in that game, and his marking ability is pretty good. Probably needs to work on his contested game. He gets jumped into a little bit in the ruck, but as I said before, there's not many athletic big guys who can do the things that he does. He's super clean, and can just impact around the ground. That's what you want to see. There's so much upside with him. So it'll be tough for the Suns to get all three, I think. Like other clubs would be monitoring at least one of them, probably Rogers. But going to be a super haul if they manage to get all three.
Well, yeah, as you said, Walter potentially a top 5 pick or seen in that top 5 bracket. When you talk about the draft board and just an early look from what we've seen now, obviously Rogers as stock is on the rise. Would he be in that next wave behind, and then Reid probably the one behind that? Is that how you might see it, from maybe an early first round, and then maybe a late or early second round pick across those 3 names?
Yeah, I reckon I'd probably have Reid in the number 2 slot out of the 3. I don't know if many people would have it the same, but I just think because of his size and his athleticism, his upside, I'd probably have him in that first round bracket. And Rogers pushing for that too. Like he's a gun. It's probably just his size that holds him back a little bit. Doesn't really hold him back, but it might hold him back in the eyes of recruiters, you know. And that wavers between, each club. So I think they could both be first round candidates. I'd probably have, Walter though, top 5, then Reid top 15 and Rogers top 25.
Okay, so plenty of obviously trades that the Suns will need to be making to clear up, I guess, their opening picks from the draft, but also getting in plenty of later selections. Obviously, Brisbane had to get 2 first rounders in through father-son selections in Will Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher last year, and it could be quite an uphill battle for the Suns as well. But if they get 2 of the 3, it's going to be great. But it looks like, and you'd like to think they can manage to get 3, that plenty of wheeling and dealing to come from the Suns. They weren't the only players to stand out though, and I'm happy to touch on Harley Reid for a little bit. We could go on for a whole hour, but his evening ended a little bit short. But what did we see from him in that game, and what were the big positives that we might have already known about, but are just continuing to see from the likely number 1 pick?
Yeah, I sent an angry email to Carlton about the player who knocked him out. No, but obviously Reid suffered that head knock, as you say, and didn't play the last quarter and a little bit of the third. So, but before that, obviously started in midfield. That's probably his starting position, his best position. His contested ball's amazing. His ability to burst out, hand out fend-offs and just he's got a great highlight reel. He's a player that people want to watch. So he showed all of those signs. Also went back to defence. So he's a great interceptor, reads the play super well and can drive the ball forward. Can play on each line. I think we know that. We know what he can do by now. Probably wasn't as prolific or prominent as he was in the last game where he was best of field, but still, we know that he's the best prospect, and as you said, we could talk about him all day. So it's another Harley Reid game. Yeah,
it seems to be the case. He's the talk of the town just about every draft showcase game. But I guess what's really important for what will be important for 17 other clubs at the end of the year is who else is there going to be available around those following picks. If he lands at pick 1, then who we kind of have in that next bracket. We're talking just before the show as well about the kind of spread. You mentioned Walter, a Queensland talent, Harley Reid from Big Country, but we've got some of the top names and top 10 picks coming from SA, WA, Vic Metro as well as country, and then as well as that Tasmania also coming through. So who's in that group? Probably just outside, maybe the 4 or 5 names alongside Reid and Walter that are pushing for as emerging as top 5 selections.
Yeah, everyone knows about the Wizard, Nick Watson. He'll be right up there as a top 5 talent. Obviously, another pint-sized prospect at 170 centimetres or 169, but we'll round it up. He's obviously a gun. We know what he can do. We've got Zane Duursma, who was a little bit quieter in that game, but you look at his moments, his ability to win the ball off the tap in the centre, stream away, you can hit the scoreboard, great size and athleticism. And he's the brother of, obviously, he's got Xavier and Yazzie at Port Adelaide in the AFL system. So
Willem on the way through as well. There's a few Duursmas coming through at the moment.
Yeah, and Willem's actually the tallest of the lot. He's only 16. So, Zane's going to be right up there. Colby McKercher's one who's built himself, the Tasmanian, into top 5 contention, just super consistent. He's got that burst of speed away from the stoppage, wins so much of the ball. I think in our Rookie Me Central medal, which is essentially the best and fairest, he's gotten 5 votes in every game that he's played. Wow. So goes to show his consistency and level of performance. I'd be remiss not to mention guys like Dan Curtin as well from WA. Obviously can play at either end of the ground as a swingman. Key position player, also played in midfield for Claremont recently. So as that big body in there, just super versatility, really composite ball in hand. And I suppose the other one you're alluding to is Ashton Moir from South Australia. He's been probably a touch disappointing. Obviously, we know he's got a range of traits, like you can kick off both feet, some freakish ability in the air as well. His athleticism's great. He's a pretty driven kid. It's just about his consistency of performance. And, we see him one week kicking 4 goals in the reserves, but he's had a couple of knocks here and there and was pretty quiet for the academy. So if he can build his consistency, probably top 5 on talent. He'll be hanging around my top 10, I'd say. Power rankings aren't out yet, but soon.
soon to come. And I think, like you said, probably didn't see the most out of Ashton Moir, but pairing with Nate Caddy is always going to be pretty exciting when if you ever get the chance to see those two in the same forward 50. Nate, I think he's the nephew of Josh Caddy, Premiership Tiger, and another likely first-round pick from what we've seen so far out of the Northern Knights. What have you kind of been impressed with most, and what kind of players Nate? Because it seems like he's a key position talent, but he's not as tall as maybe you'd think, maybe not close to the Jedd Walter type.
Yeah, I think he's 193 centimetres, so can be like a Charlie Curnow type of key forward where he's got that really good leaping ability but covers the ground pretty well. He might be a bit undersized where, if he comes up against a Harris Andrews, that, it's going to test him aerially. But I guess Curnow's got Mackay to take that load off him. But Caddy, just a super leaper at the ball. Like his marking ability is incredible. A bit taller than his uncle Josh, but plays naturally as a forward. Played a little bit as a midfielder last year because he's so athletic, can cover the ground really well. He's quick and obviously has that size on the inside. But a natural forward. And I think coming off an injury in pre-season where he had a chip in his fibula, I think. It was essentially a fractured leg. He recovered from that pretty quickly and managed to just build into some form. I think we're going to see the best of him towards the end of the year. He's building nicely and would probably be around that top 15 range and certainly top 10 coming into the year. So, just a really exciting prospect.
And obviously all eyes were on the AFL Academy game and their win over the Blues, but there's still plenty of action elsewhere for those that weren't selected. And you even had your eye on the SA representative game against the Giants and Swans, and one standout for you, a Hawthorn father-son pick.
Yeah, for me, easily the most draftable player afield in that game. He'll be a top 20 player, could even be sort of top 10 or 15. Incredible athletes. Obviously, he's a Hawthorn father-son, the son of Luke.
That's Will McCabe.
Yep. Will McCabe, of course, who we're talking about. 197 centimetres, can play at either end of the ground. Found a home in the back line for South Australia and has done for Central District as well. But he was All-Australian in last year's Under-16 championship, playing, I guess, over age. As I said, super athletic. Like his ability to leap at the ball, get it at its highest point, and then take off as well. He's got a pretty good long right foot kick. He's got really good speed as well. Just freakish sort of stuff. Like, talk about unicorns. He's probably in that sort of mould where, like, he can kind of do stuff that's similar to Nick Cox. Whether he goes up and plays on a wing, remains to be seen, but he moves that well. So, he's just a super talent. And I think those talls are really beginning to stand out and rise up the ranks. You've got guys like Connor O'Sullivan, Ethan Reid, Mitch Edwards, Will McCabe. Like, they're all those lean, developable talls who just look like really taking over from perhaps some of those midfielders or exciting half forwards that were originally at the top of the tree.
Yeah, right. And it'd be great for the Hawks, I think, to get some luck from the father-sons and I reckon they'll have a few coming through in the next few years. But when you talk about, Ben Allen only playing, I think, 98 games, so he was 2 games shy of that milestone with Hawthorn, Dean Anderson for Noah Anderson, so a bit of a what could have been for the Hawks, but it sounds like they're going to get, or are in line to get, a great talent in Will McCabe. We also want to touch on, I guess, instead of just this year's national draft, last year's class, the class of 2022, 9 rounds in to the AFL season. We've gotten plenty of glimpses at some of the star talents, some certainly making a name for themselves very early and very immediately, in Harry Sheezel and Will Ashcroft. I think, obviously 2 former teammates at the Sandringham Dragons. Sheezel, though, probably the surprising one, not necessarily because of his impact, but the role he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, across half-back, we saw glimpses of that for Sandringham. I think the coaches originally wanted him to play in that position a little more. They tried it for a couple of weeks and didn't really work out, and they go, no, you're a natural forward, go back there, kick goals. He ran through the midfield as well. We know he can accumulate. Like, he had some big games in the NAB League last year with, over 30 touches and, bags of 4, 5, 6 goals. So we know he can rack up the numbers. He's been great for Supercoach as well, if you pay attention to that. But like North Melbourne, you can tell how highly they rated him, given they took him with their first pick, with pick 3. So, ahead of George Wardlaw, obviously, who many thought was probably the number 2 prospect. So, he's been super in that relatively new, unfamiliar role across half-back, and could even be, I guess, the best performed player of the draft crop so far.
And Will Ashcroft, another one. He's probably right in that top bracket as well, I think, from what we've seen over the opening 9 rounds, and look, hasn't had a single issue with playing midfield at the elite level. Yeah,
just rolls right into that Brisbane Lions midfield, which is pretty strong as it is, and just he'll hardly look out of place. Like, he just looks comfortable. I think most people thought he'd just roll in there and get games consistently and do his usual thing, because his output at junior level was insane, and insanely consistent too. So, talk about numbers, like Will, had over 50 touches in a NAB League game last year, and doing that in 25 flat minute quarters is pretty ridiculous. So he carried on that, I guess, that promise, the upside, and deservingly was one of the top 2 players drafted last year. And we knew it was going to happen, really. Like, if you had seen him play before, you wouldn't be too surprised by what he's doing now. So, I think those 2 are probably the best 2 performed. There's obviously other guys who are right up there too, though. Yeah, well, you got, Max Michalanney's had a really good impact for the Crows, taking on, mostly the opposition's best small forward. Reuben Ginbey, I think he's second in the competition for tackles. He had 16 against the Suns on the weekend. But, as a Blues man, Ollie Hollands, Lachie Cowan, 2 guys I think you'd be pretty happy to get on draft night, but you're pretty happy to also be seeing immediate results from those 2. Yeah, I think Hollands in particular has been super impressive. He's the hardest runner almost in the competition. Like, his GPS rating would be off the charts, constantly covering 15, 16 Ks a game. And, there's a few Blues fans who say, you just should give him a rest. He's just a young kid, but he just keeps doing his thing, and has really just sort of elevated, I guess, a pretty average-looking team at the moment. So he's been a good positive. Obviously, you mentioned Cowan as well. Some good signs from him recently. Sort of, I guess, earned that rest after his early season promise. So he's going to have plenty more time to impress, and could even be in the frame to get picked up when Tassie comes into the comp. It's going to be an interesting few years, especially when you talk about,
McKercher and Jack Hallen and some of these guys coming through for Tas. We mentioned it, I think, a couple of weeks ago on Zero Hanger TV, just the dilemma that some list managers will have in whether they roll the dice on some of these guys. And Cowan was certainly one of them as well. From the class of 2022, like I said, we've seen some really, great first year starts for a lot of these guys, but there's obviously a lot of top talent that hasn't played yet, whether that's just through development or injury. So is there a player probably maybe from the first round that we haven't seen that you'd be really keen for their debut and what they can offer in their first year or the coming years?
Yeah, I'll give you two names. So we'll talk about teammates, two Oakley teammates from last year, Elijah Tsatas and George Wardlaw, picks 5 and 4 respectively. Obviously Wardlaw is returning through the VFL and showing some good signs, and probably won't be too hard to get a game with the Roos at the moment. So he could be one that's unleashed pretty soon, but Elijah Tsatas, obviously a more long-term injury, and both are so talented, great athleticism. Like Wardlaw's a real brute on the inside, so powerful. So I think he'll be a standout from the off. Tsatas might be a bit more outside to start, but if he can get front of stoppage at AFL level and wheel away, watch out, he's a gun. So I'm looking forward to seeing those two.
Two very exciting prospects yet to be seen. For me, I think Jedd Busslinger. Actually, Luke Beveridge said this week that how happy he's been with the key defensive stocks this year. It was a problem for them last year. They get Liam Jones in, they draft Jedd Busslinger. They've seen, I think, some great results from Alex Keith and Ryan Gardner this year, as well as Josh Bruce playing down back. But they've got another one, Jedd Busslinger, really exciting, and obviously coming off shoulder surgery at the end of last year. So he's just been eased back and has played a couple VFL games and looked pretty impressive. So another one to watch from the class of 2022 that we haven't seen yet. And that will just about wrap up today's episode of Zero Hanger TV. Mark, thank you for joining us for Rookie Me Central. Obviously, where can all of our viewers and listeners, come and find your content each week? Yeah, so it's Central, I'll get it right, central.rookieme.com/AFL. That's where you find all of our draft content, whether it be on the homepage or if you follow us on socials at Rookie Me Central, that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Might even do some YouTube content. Obviously, we'll be collaborating with Zero Hanger a little bit too, so watch out for that. Exciting times ahead. There's going to be plenty of content, whether that be scouting notes, power rankings are coming out at the end of the month. And obviously, we have our draft guide every year. So must have content. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, it's certainly exciting and some fantastic draft analysis and draft work put in from the Rookie Me Central team. So certainly keep up the great work. That'll wrap up today's episode. Thank you once again for watching Zero Hanger TV. Plenty more draft content to come throughout the year, and we'll catch you next week.